Today, I am thrilled to introduce the team from the Common Crawl Foundation. That includes Greg Lindahl, Tom Vaughn, Sebastian Nagel, and Pedro Ortiz Suarez. If you're not familiar with Common Crawl is dedicated to preserving humanity's knowledge and making it accessible through its free public web dataset, which has served as a vital resource since 2008. As AI development accelerates, there have been concerns that have emerged regarding the accessibility and transparency of public web data, impacting open data sets in three ways: robots.txt exclusions, legal demands, and bot defenses. Two of these are not visible in public and are not very well understood. So in today's seminar, the team from Common Crawl will present insights from a new data product that utilizes Common Crawl's crawl metadata to visually explore these three problems and advocate for greater transparency and informed solutions for the future of public web data.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Sebastian. I will start with the presentation. I think you already read the title, so I will skip over this. And we have multiple sections, and I will change with my colleagues. They will present other parts. So first, a brief introduction of Common Crawl. We are a nonprofit making web data accessible to programmers and data scientists. So that's our focus, technical people with technical skills to work with data. It's a free archive of the public web since 2007, founded by Gilal Bass, which is here in the room. Welcome. And the data is hosted as open dataset on Amazon Web Services, and it's cited in over 10,000 research papers. So that's paper citing Common Crawl until this recently, and there was a steady growth in the annual publications. It's non-cumulative counts. Common Crawl use cases are manifold. They go from feeding search indexes, socio-political research, linguistic analysis, internet security research, economic research, up to AI, machine learning training, building large language models and other models. And of course, there's a lot more. You have to look into papers, into the work. Our mission generally is make high quality public web crawl data available to everyone. Once this was limited to large engineers working on large search engines. Support people, governments, organizations, make data-driven decisions and tackle global issues, and build an open knowledge ecosystem that encourages sharing and innovation. And of course, by this way, support understanding and preservation of language, community, and culture. So, short overview of the data. So, today we crawled over 300 billion web pages, spanning 70 years, from 2008 to 2025. So we add around 2.5 billion pages every month, and we released more than 100 crawl archives to date. And in total, that's about 10 petabytes of data now. And we have additional data products, a web graph, post index, and many more. So that's a short overview of the data download. So last year, we almost reached 1 exabyte of data downloads. That's impressive. And that's downloads by geographic location, and you can see where it's distributed. So a look back in time of data collection, we have 4 phases of data collection using different crawler implementations, approaches to find and sample, prioritize seeds and URLs, and page heuristic policies. So in the early years, we used Apache Nudge a web crawler, open source web crawler project, but it was list-based. So basically we had lists of URLs which then were fetched and archived. 2012, we switched to an in-house web crawler project. It's still available on GitHub. And yeah, seeds and link prioritization was based on PageRank scores. 2013, we switched back to Nudge with seed donation. That means list-based. So we had from the Blacko search engine startup, we received large lists of URLs, which were then archived. And since 2017 until now, we continue to use Nudge, but we prioritize our crawls by using harmonic centrality. That's similar to PageRank. And I mean, the revisit policy is now, so we have about 30% new URLs and about 70 revisits based on page relevance. And yeah, I mean, this is a general question. What is a representative sample of the public web? I mean, there are many aspects. So it's about breadth, coverage of unique domains, websites, or depth per site coverage, freshness, new content versus revisits. And then, of course, you have things like the amount of duplicates or near duplicates per crawl or multiple crawls, regional coverage, top-level domains, content languages, content quality generally, and of course, and that this is very difficult. I mean, is the data set applicable for a given data use case? And we want to support every data use case, and that's why, of course, we cannot fulfill optimally every single data use case. You have to, make a compromise. So that's just an overview over size and freshness and the total number of page captures in every year. And yeah, I mean, you see in the earlies, it was, I mean, we had one crawl per year, so that's why the numbers relatively small. And then now we try to run every month a crawl, and that's why the number is higher. And you see, we try to reach this 37% balance between new captures and new visits and revisits. Oops. Yeah, and after this overview, we go to the main topic of this presentation. Crawler, policies, politeness, robots.txt, and everything around. So generally, our crawler crawls slowly, and it even further slows down with an exponential backoff if a site responds with errors. We respect the robots.txt rules, the robots exclusion protocol, and also URI level meta tags, the meta no-follow element, for example. CCBot, that's our crawler, the user agent, identifies itself. It sends a user agent string and contact information along with the requests, and we crawl from a fixed list of IP addresses, which is publicly announced and also verifiable via reverse DNS. Let me shortly speak or introduce the robots exclusion protocol, the robots.txt. I don't know, maybe you just give me a sign who already knows what it is. Yeah, so about 50%. So I will give an example for the remaining people. So this is a text file, robots.txt, which is deployed in the root folder of a website. It's readable for web crawlers, but also for humans. And it contains policies whether and how crawlers shall access the site's content. It's a technical solution to coordinate different interests between the owners of content and robots, web crawlers. It has been standardized very recently, just 3 years ago in RFC 9309. Before it was a draft for, I think, 30 years. Somewhere in 1994, I think it was, the draft was made. And it's a convention based on consensus, not a legally binding regulation, yet a widely acknowledged opt-out protocol. So, yeah, site owners can tell crawlers or indicate crawlers that they do not want to be crawled. So that's an example of a robots.txt from 2022. It's from the English broadcasting service BBC. It's a little bit simplified. The original is much longer. And what you can see on the left side, so the first block, that's rules which exclude templates, dynamic content, user pages. Here, the first block is a dedicated set of rules for Googlebot, Google's search engine crawler. And there's also a similar block for Bing Bot, another search engine crawler. And then you see the default rule set, that's the wildcard user agent. And it's marginally different. So for whatever reason, shopping lists were excluded for the wildcard default user agent. And in the bottom, you see there are two bad bots likely are directly addressed and entirely excluded. So not clear what they did. Maybe they did some harm, overcrawled the BBC website, and that's why the webmasters decided, okay, we show them a signal that they are not welcome anymore. Okay, that was 2022. And now how it looks this year. So you still have for the wildcard user agent, the default block. It's quite similar. Of course, it has changed a little bit from time. But now you see there is just a long list of user agents which are entirely disallowed. Yeah, what happened? Yeah, it's the arrival of ChatGPT and other tools based on large language models. And yeah, I will hand over to Greg to introduce this topic, what happened in this year or starting earlier.
So we have a bit of a tag team going on here. So my name is Greg Lindahl, and I'm the CTO at Common Crawl. Sebastian has been working there since 2016 and did a lot to improve the quality. But in 2012, he mentioned there was a data donation, and that came from a search engine named Pleco that was like Google, only less successful. And Rich Skrenta over there, who's now the executive director of Common Crawl Foundation, and I were founders at Pleco. So I've been an advisor of Common Crawl since 2012, and I was Sebastian's only technical interview when he was hired. I said, hire this guy, he's perfect. And that worked out really well. Okay, so here's my one slide. If you recall history, so ChatGPT 3 was first released, in 2020, but it wasn't really available on the web until 2022. And so the day it was released, Rich texted me and he's like, "Oh my God, you have to try this," because like a lot of older geeks, I tried every natural language thing that was ever released and it was crap until November 2022. And I'm like, oh my God, this isn't perfect, but this is amazing. And it turned out that ChatGPT was mainly trained 86% on web data from Common Crawl. And so that it caused a positive and a negative backlash. So the positive thing was that Gil and Sebastian had noticed that Common Crawl was most of the training data. And Gil is like, oh, I should hire an executive director and see if we can make Common Crawl a lot bigger. And so he put out a job ad. Rich calls me up and he's like, I see this Common Crawl ad, and you appear to be their advisor already. And I'm like, yeah, I told you that in 2012 and you forgot. So I said, tell Gil I said hi, and tell Gil he has to hire us both. and Gil did, and here we are today with a much larger organization. Okay, so that was the good part of the backlash. The bad part of the backlash was that a lot of content owners got extremely angry about AI, and most of those people who are angry about AI are angry about AI today still. And the initial backlash for AI mentioned not only GPT bot, which was already crawling the web and not being rate limited enough, but also CC bot was cited as being an evil AI bot, the same as Chat GPT bot. And we have always crawled carefully, but that facts don't help when people are angry. And then the backlash got a lot worse because there's a large number now of abusive, anonymous, apparently AI crawlers out there flooding websites with traffic. And so one example, such as the glam world of libraries and museums and whatnot, and I hang out on one of their Slacks, and their systems aren't really designed for high traffic, and there's a lot more traffic than there used to be, and it appears to all be bad people. And they're having big technical problems with that. And so CCBot, even though CCBot has always been polite, is even included in their lists of bots to block. And we're the easiest bot in the world to block. So when people block us, it works. Also, some big infrastructure providers saw this as a marketing opportunity. We will protect your website from the evil AI people. And so Cloudflare and WordPress both did things. So Cloudflare has a block AI bots checkbox, and if you check that box, Common Crawl is blocked. And if you create a new Cloudflare website, that box is defaults checked. And if you have to pay the money in order to be able to edit the list of evil AI bots, and we're on that list. So we're blocked by a lot of people. They claim 3.8 million websites that have a managed robots.txt. We haven't confirmed that number. It's there in our archive. Okay, so that's one style of blocking, and you can see it because it appears in robots.txt. Another style of blocking is to turn on bot defenses. So the abusive, anonymous, probably AI bots, people fight them by having rate limits and whatnot. And since we always come from the same set of IP addresses, since we identify ourselves as being CCBot, we're a sitting duck. And so, for example, WordPress, you'll notice that we have stopped crawling them. It's about a year and a half ago. And that's because they turned on a really low rate limit for us that we're like able to crawl one page an hour or something like that. And so as a result, WordPress hosted at websites now don't appear in our data set. We have a lot of raw data about this bot blocking, which I had hoped to have analyzed for this talk, but sadly I didn't get that done in time. And so Sebastian is going to go through the data that we do have, which is mainly comes from other researchers, and some of it from us.
So yes, we will now look into several research papers I will present, and also some metrics derived from what our crawler sees and in the archived crawl robots.txt files. So first, that's a research paper from last year, some site I used to crawl. And I mean, what you can see is the proportion of sites that fully disallow any AI-related user agents, including CCBot, broken down by site rank, increased significantly in summer 2023. So the data is the top 5K and top 100K Trunco domains. Trunco is a neutral ranked list of domains. So maybe some of you remember the Alexa ranks, but it's a continuation with some more scientific background and transparent background. And other part of the data in this paper is Common Crawl's robots.txt captures. So we have a data set of robots.txt captures started in 2016. So, and you can just analyze what happened over the last 9 years in how robots.txt is used to address various user agents. And what you can see, and that's where two takeaways, that's the increase in 2023, and the other is that it makes a difference if you look at a top stratum or a lower stratum. So basically, the top domains tend to be more disallow AI crawlers, AI-related crawlers. So that's a very important finding. So, and we build on this and have similar metrics, which go up to last month. So that's just impact on web crawling for CCBot, Common Crawl's web crawler, and the share of sites blocking CCBot has grown since 2023. That's visible. And for higher ranking sites, that's above 10%. It's for the top 1K sites, it's even 20%. For the long tail, the share of disallowed sites grew from 3 to 6 up to 10%. And yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Does the trend continue? For the top 1K, it seems that it settles down. But for the lower strata, it seems still to continue. That's an interesting question where we are in 1 year. The good question, what is about other user agents? This was only CCBot. So that's just a visualization of many user agents we now see in robots.txt captures. And you can see starting 2023, something was happening. But here it's only spaghetti. I mean, it's very difficult to interpret. So what we do is here to understand how this affects individual user agents, we use the wildcard user agent as baseline and use the ratio of disallowed sites for user agent X divided by the number of disallowed sites for the wildcard user agents. So basically, that's a normalization, and then you can see how different user agents perform in robots.txt blocking. And this or the next slides are based on the top 50K stratum. So just as an example how this looks like for a couple of user agents. And you can see for 2 user agents, that's Googlebot and Bingbot, they are even preferred. They are more allowed than the wildcard user agent on more sites. Other user agents are penalized compared to the wildcard user agent and also compared to Googlebot, Bingbot. For example, Baidu Spider, the crawler for the Chinese search engine Baidu. And also CCBot was more penalized, and 2023, this changed dramatically. And also there are some user agents which only show up at this time, GPTbot and Googlebot extended. So that's AI-related Google web crawler. So, and if you just do this for different types of user agents, web crawlers, you can see, I mean, for search engines, there is almost no change over time. Of course, again, there are some which are more preferred, some which are less preferred, but that's the picture. Yeah, search engine optimization crawlers are generally not very welcome, so they are mostly penalized, but again, there is no change over time. Yeah, web archiving crawlers, maybe for Internet Archive crawler, there is a little change, but there's a clear change for ccBot. I mean, if you take ccBot also as an archival crawler. Yeah, we archive content, web content. And yeah, I mean, if you look at AI crawlers, the picture is clear. Everything goes up 2023. Maybe there is an additional increase visible this year, just the couple of months before. And yeah, I mean, there are few similar if you take AI search crawlers or AI agent crawlers, you see a similar picture, but with much less data up to now. Yeah, good question is what's the impact of robots.txt blocking on machine learning training data for large language models. That's a work Consent in Crisis by Jane Longpree and others, and shows the percentage of restricted training tokens by robots.txt. So the head is the top 2K websites by token count in C4, Dolma, and Refined Web. That's 2 training data sets. And the full corpus is just 10K randomly sampled sites. And again, you see a similar picture. So the lower stratum has an increase, a clear increase, but it's small, while for the higher stratum, it's the jump is much more significant. And yeah, that's work from researchers in Switzerland. They actually trained small language models based on different data sets. I mean, a data set which takes exclusions into account and another one which doesn't. So the question is, can performant LMMs be ethical? So if they are polite, take opt-outs into account, are they still performant? And they came to the conclusion that pre-training on fully open data does not significantly impact general knowledge understanding. Even if all news publishers opt out, the effect remains minimal. So the language models are maybe slightly bit less performant, but still the evaluation is quite good. But nevertheless, there is, of course, some impact. I mean, that's French researchers which do a similar work. Quite recently, the paper went out last month, the preprint. And I mean, they look on it also from the perspective of topical classification of websites. And what you can see that the impact on crawling differs on what type of site is. So for shopping, for example, it's less significant than for news sites. And another thing they look onto is, I mean, if you try to classify sites by the political leaning, left, center, right, then you see a clear, the center is more likely, center-leaning sites or centric sites are more likely to opt out via robots.txt than, left-leaning or right-leaning sites. And this, of course, can have some impact on training data and then on large language models, how they perform in or on their bias, basically. And that's my part. I hand over to Tom, which will speak about legal aspects and policies. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. My name's Tom Vaughan. I've been an engineer at Common Crawl for about 2 years. Aside from engineering, I also work on policy research aspects of Common Crawl's operations. So at the technical standards level, there is some growing momentum around the how automated agents and AI systems should access web resources responsibly. And just a little bit more sort of crowd participation. Who here knows what the IETF is? Great. Okay, it was fewer than I'd hoped, but there's still a lot of people, I guess. So the IETF is the Internet Engineering Task Force. They're a technical standards body who create standards for how the internet works. So HTTP, the specification for how that protocol works, that's a standard from the IETF, and it's ratified in something called an RFC, which starts out as an internet draft. So eventually it becomes a thing that everybody uses. So several working groups at the IETF are active in the space. There's the AI Preferences Working Group, or AI Pref. They are developing mechanisms for sites to express preferences about AI use and automated data access. The idea is it's like an evolution of robots.txt, but for the AI era, standardizing metadata that says whether content can or cannot be used for model training, inference, or other automated processing. There's also the WebBot.auth working group, which is taking a protocol level approach, which looks at how bots can authenticate using verifiable identities when making crawling requests. So traditionally, distinguishing legitimate crawlers from opaque or abusive ones has been done via verified IP address ranges or just addresses, and reverse DNS, which is how we authenticate, how we identify ourselves. There is also a draft, which is it's on the paid crawling requirements, which it looks at how to use the long dormant HTTP code 402, which is payment required. The idea is that websites could signal paid or tiered access to structured data using standardized response headers and signals rather than an ad hoc block or a captcha, something of that nature. But so you will probably know what a 404 is and a 403, but yeah, entree 402 back into the fray. So in short, there's now the beginnings of formalizing what's long been an informal ecosystem of politeness, polite policies and access conventions. Meanwhile, in the policy domain, civil society organizations like Open Future are proposing vocabularies to help publishers indicate opt-out preferences for AI training, and text and data mining, or TDM for short. Basically making policy documents machine readable, which is very much a required thing if you want a machine to read something. Creative Commons is also launching CC Signals, which is extending this approach. It embeds clear indicators for permissible reuse. For example, if something is okay for training, or if something requires attribution, that's put into the metadata, licenses, and even the HTTP headers. The aim is to provide a technical hook that aligns with the legal norms. Commons DB maintains a public registry of open data sets, acting as an authoritative catalog for discoverable and clearly licensed web data. Meanwhile, across both technical and policy domains, there's a theme that's emerging. It's how to balance open access with respect for content stewardship and lawful use. And the private sector is basically taking enforcement into its own hands. For example, Cloudflare and other major CDNs started explicitly blocking traffic identified as coming from AI crawlers, using a user agent string or signature or request fingerprinting. Many publishers are now serving 403 forbidden, or 429 too many requests, or slow down for these bots. And they're occasionally using a very strange one, 451, unavailable for legal reasons. These are HTTP codes when access is requested. At Common Crawl, we are continuing to take a very transparent approach. We maintain and publish a full opt-out registry listing every, I'll come to that slide. We list every opt-out request we've ever had to date. We hope that downstream users of our data will use this to filter the data that they've already downloaded. And the frequency of these such requests has increased steadily, as you can see in this slide. And that's 2025 so far, by the way. We anticipate it will go a little higher. So overall, the direction is pretty clear. We need a more structured, standards-driven web ecosystem where machines can access data, but there's consent and compensation coexisting. This is Shane Longpre's, or Shane Longpre and others' quote from Consent in Crisis that Sebastian mentioned earlier. If respected or enforced, these restrictions are rapidly biasing the diversity, freshness, and scaling laws for general purpose AI systems. The foreclosure of much of the open web will impact not only commercial AI, but also non-commercial AI and academic research. It's a harrowing thing. But we also quite like this quote. The only thing that you absolutely have to know is the location of the library. It's Albert Einstein. So I'll hand on to Pedro now. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So, hey everyone, I'm Pedro Ortiz Suarez. I'm Principal Research Scientist at the Common Crawl Foundation. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about web data and language coverage. And to start talking about that, I first wanted to talk a little bit about what is the prevalence of web data in LLMs today, probably because this segues very well into the language discussion. I did a PhD in, well, computational linguistics and natural language processing. And one of the things I remember, that was back in 2018, one of the things that I remember my supervisor telling me is like, your data sets have to be balanced, meaning that they have to cover as many registers of language as possible. And by registers of language, we used to mean something like, okay, when you write something for a Wikipedia article, you're not using the same register of language that you're using when you're writing a, I don't know, a Twitter or X post or a Blue Sky or whatever, or something on social media. So the way we speak formally is not the same way we speak informally, and it's not the same way we write certain types of documents. So the idea is like, okay, we need to be balancing these types of registers. And one of the amazing things of the web is that the web is very diverse and it's very easy to get thanks to efforts like the things that we do at the Common Crawl Foundation. So that has translated in stuff like when we used to know what went into LLMs, and this is why it's a today issue, is because people stopped reporting what they go into the pre-training data of the LLMs. If you look at the distribution, for instance, this is the distribution of Llama, 82% of the content that went into Llama was web data. And the rest were distributed around other sources. So this is great, but one of the things that we like people to know is that web is a very good foundation for your data set, but it contains stuff like fiction, bias, propaganda. So you will have to work on your data set and you will have to clean it. Of course, web doesn't cover everything, it's very diverse, but you will have to supplement your data with stuff like, well, codes of source codes of programming written in diverse programming languages, and then of course, books, encyclopedia, stuff that covers all those registers that tend to be a little bit more formal. Now, talking about languages, you will have if you're trying to do anything multilingually, now you have a much bigger problem because you will have to try to cover all those registers, but then also try to cover all those languages, okay? And this gets very hard very quickly because languages are not equally represented and certainly not equally represented across the web. So this is the graph of the distribution of languages of this Bloom project that was an open source, one of the first open source LLM trained on multilingual data. And as you can see, languages, so the European languages like English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, they are dominant in the training data of the Bloom model. But then the other languages that we added to that training data, well, they are less represented, and so the model ends up being not as performant for those languages. So this is something we want to work on, and we can do it in a way in working with the common crawl data. So let us talk a little bit about what's the geographical coverage and language coverage of common crawl. Well, sadly, we don't have annotations since the beginning. But there are some things that we can do. So for instance, we can look at top-level domains and try to get an idea of what's the coverage for the first years, especially. This table is a little bit difficult to read. So if you aggregate by .com, .net, and then by top-level domains corresponding to the different continents, you can have a little bit better of an idea of the coverage. Knowing that this data is not perfect because, well, there are multiple multilingual datasets, so datasets that are not in English that also use the .com and .net top-level domains, and of course that but something that we do want to point out is that when you aggregate this way, in this way, most of the content still today, it's coming from the .com and .net top-level domains. This is a better visualization of exactly the same thing. Something that we like to point out is that at least in common crawl, we have been improving a little bit the coverage in terms of those top-level domains, okay? Oops, okay. I think run out of battery, it's okay. So in 2018, we started annotating individual pages using the CLD2 model for language identification. And here you can see the statistics by year, or the percentages of the language distribution by year. As you can see, English has remained quite stable, but some other languages, interestingly, Russian has been decreasing, and some other languages have been ticking up slowly. So we are slowly gathering more multilingual content. Okay, map. So, okay, to sum that up, we have around 45% of the content is in English. We have 5%, 5% for each of these languages. So each of them have around 5%. And the other languages, the long tail is 2% or below. So this is clearly not balanced. So we are working on improving that and improving the coverage of common crawl. We have two different initiatives, or well, three different initiatives that are in which we are working through. One is the Web Languages Project. Is a crowdsourcer effort to improve the low resource or underserved languages. In fact, we use, at Common Crawl, we use a term which we call languages other than English, mostly because for us, the English is the most well-represented languages and everything else is severely underrepresented compared to English. We have this line that we use, so language, community, and culture on that project. That is very important to us because it's not only about expanding language coverage, it's also about working with communities and having more cultural coverage. This is because, I mean, you can crawl, for instance, more websites from Spain, but there are other Spanish-speaking countries other than Spain. So it's not only about having more Spanish content, it's about distributing that Spanish content throughout the different Spanish-speaking communities, for instance, and that it's true for every other language. And what we are doing in that project is collecting URLs. So you can contribute, for instance, by telling us which are your favorite websites in languages other than English. And then we add it to the seed in order to try to steer the crawl and discover more content. So hopefully this will influence the ranking of those websites, and we will discover more content for you. The other two initiatives are working on better text extracts that work better multilingually, and also improving the language identification. So this is the Web Languages project. You will have the link there, and there are going to be at the end, probably after the Q&A, we'll upload the slides so that you can also click on these links. Okay. This is the other initiative, so it's the LangID project. This is something that we are doing with different communities, with different linguistic communities. So we took samples of common crawl data, pre-annotated them using various models of language identification, and we asked native speakers to validate those annotations for us. We had already almost 30,000 annotations, so 30,000 documents annotated, but we are still looking for more because that only covers around 80 languages so far. And building on top of that, we hosted a workshop on multilingual data quality signals 2 weeks ago at Montreal. This was part of the CoLM conference. And here we also hosted a share task in which we asked people like, okay, we have this new data set that has been validated in language identification, and we would like you to suggest new architectures or new language identification systems in order for us to actually probably in the future integrate it to our data set and use it to annotate it. It was very interesting because many people thought that language identification was a solved problem. This is far from true. There are hundreds of languages and, well, even thousands of languages that we cannot possibly cover right now. CLD2 is only covering around 160 languages. So we really want to work on improving the data sets and improving the system so we can annotate more languages and actually steer the crawl and discover more content. So yeah, to sum up everything we talked about, again, we are working on the language initiatives. We have these two initiatives of the human curated seed list, which is web languages, and then the label samples for developing new systems for language identification. About the first part of the talk, we're also working a lot in policy, working with the IETF working groups, submitting position policy papers to the UK, EU, and the US. We are expanding the collaboration with different civic groups, also with academic institutions, for instance, also with the NSF. So, thank you.
Hello, my name's Daniel. Yeah, I think a lot about, if you have your website online, like, wouldn't it be in your interest to have it accessible to large language models? Because the amount of people who are using now, large language models for search, and if your website is not part of what is being returned, isn't it sort of like counterproductive to, block your website to be crawled by them? So my sort of follow-up question is like, there's the idea of like the semantic web of being able to describe what you want and being able to search and finding websites related to that. And I'm curious if you guys had any thoughts about that and sort of, the tension between, trying to save your content and yeah.
So we do have a lot of thoughts about that. So we've given 3 conference talks recently on that topic and 2 blog posts. There's this thing called search engine optimization that people have been doing with search engines for a long time, right? And if you want people to actually find your content, you need to organize it so that Google and Bing, et cetera, will do a good job of presenting your web page when people ask about it. So the same thing is true in the AI era. You want large language models to know about concepts, especially if you're a company that sells things, right? The United Airlines wants to make sure that there's enough content on the web that mentions United as a company that when the LLM sees the word United capitalized in the middle of a sentence, it can successfully guess that it's an airline. So we think everybody should want to do this because you want to be found and you want your ideas to get out there. You want to sell your products. You want to do whatever. So we're a huge fan of that. And the SEO community as a whole is finally beginning to talk about this topic. And you noticed on some of the graphs, they actually got better recently. And so maybe there is a big movement to block less in the future than today.
Just also, in addition to what Greg just said, if you have content on the web in a language other than English, then if you don't want it to be in the AI training corpus, then this can be to the detriment of your entire language and community and culture. So if you wanted to train a language model to recognize something that's an unsafe prompt, for example, like how do I build a dirty bomb, or should I eat glass or whatever, if you want this model to recognize this as unsafe, it needs to have seen a lot of examples of things that are unsafe, so it can classify it and categorize it and give the user a good response, like this is an unsafe thing. And so obviously, if it's seen a lot more English unsafe stuff, it means that these models are going to be much, much safer in English, which is hugely inequitable, and it's not fair. It's like the argument that we've said quite a lot in recent talks, that if you're selling a car, you could say, hey, you can buy this car, but the brakes and the seat belts only work in English-speaking countries. That car would never be allowed to be sold in any market. So it seems silly that that's allowed in selling a language model. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm Cameron Turner with Truify AI, and I'm interested in bias and representation. And you spoke a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if basically, do you know what you don't know based on what's filtered out from bots? And can you use that knowledge to then either weight or filter in order to create a more balanced data set? Or are companies and those of us using your data responsible for doing our own weighting and filtering in order to create that representational view?
Okay. Okay, maybe I can answer in sections. So first thing that you have that people, or what we want people to know about the Common Crawl Foundation in general, is that we have a generalistic crawl. We don't run an AI crawler. And this is by design. We have a lot of users. So as you can see from the graphs, we have been operating for quite a while, even before the LLMs. And we have a lot of users that have other applications for Common Crawl data. So what that means is that, well, we want to keep it that way because we care about those users. But if you're using it for training LLMs, you will have to filter data. And this is, I mean, if you look at on the web, GitHub, but even the large companies, they provide even official tools to process Common Crawl data. But of course, these things are biased. So, I mean, I actually used to do this when I was doing my PhD, I was working with Common Crawl data and using it to train multilingual LLMs. And one thing that I can say is that process is not perfect, it's biased, and the developers of these models have to know that that is the case. It is very difficult. So the problem with when you're doing this is that the data volume is so high that it is very difficult to know what you're missing and actually to inspect what you're missing. So normally it's very hard to know what you don't know, mostly because I would say 90% of the content that you're removing is almost unreadable, meaning that on the web, you're going to find very interesting websites. I remember one website which was literally a million backslashes. So you go there and there's a million backslashes. I was shown another website recently by our friends of AI2, and they found a website in Common Crawl that is literally just powers of numbers, so of very large numbers. So when you look at the page, it's literally just a number, a very large number. So the pipelines that we develop to filter the data are mainly targeted at that kind of content. So it's things that it's probably not usable to train those LLMs. But of course, there are other stuff that are appearing. Many people use classifiers, for instance, trained on Wikipedia data, and they say like, okay, high quality. That's another discussion, because I've been working on quality data for years, and I have no idea what high quality means anymore. But some people say like, okay, high quality is everything that is close to Wikipedia. So I train a classifier with Wikipedia data, and then everything that resembles Wikipedia, let's say in Common Crawl, I keep that. That has a problem, and is that, as I was saying, you don't write on the web, and let's say on social media, on blog posts, on conversations on the web, as you write a Wikipedia article. So it ends up filtering a ton of valuable, very clean data as well. So the answer is, this is very difficult. And the answer is no, probably we don't know what we are filtering out, but that's something that we definitely have to do a lot more work on. Yeah.
So a concise way to summarize a lot of what Pedro said is, if you want to study hate speech on the internet, there's a lot of hate speech on the internet. We are your data set for that. And if we started filtering out hate speech, we would cripple the entire academic hate speech community. So we have a lot of diverse users out there.
Hello, my name is Dylan Flores. I'm a data engineer at USA. And so you saying, assuming that this trend of content owners blocking web crawlers continues, and now majority of the internet now is going to be blocking these web crawlers. You all stated that before ChatGPT released, it was more of like an informal politeness to kind of use these web crawlers. But now that majority of the internet is starting to, or the trend is, assuming the trend continues to block these web crawlers, to what new incentive structures are kind of maybe being, or solutions that are kind of maybe being in place to maybe allow, because it seems like a lot of these content owners maybe realize that, oh, okay, my data is valuable, especially to these big companies with a lot of money. So maybe what maybe proposed or maybe solutions or new incentive structures might be coming into place, especially right now, to allow these AI companies to be able to start web crawling through their content.
So Tom had a bunch of slides about this topic. As for where the market is actually going, since we're a data set provider, basically no one who's talking about this pays any attention to the fact that we're a data set provider and not a company with a crap load of money. Also, there's a price discovery problem that the New York Times firmly believes that they have the best content ever created in the history of mankind, and it's worth a lot of money. And the ablation studies that Sebastian showed are that, in fact, you don't need to train on the New York Times in order to have a great LLM. So it's a complete mess right now, and we're at the worst corner of the industry. And even the technical people who work for content providers are well aware that they don't really want to cripple our data set, but they're being told by their management to cripple us in addition to everybody else. And so it's just a huge mess. And nobody knows how it's going to shake out.
one thing to think about is that when people are having these conversations about how they can be compensated fairly for their data, first of all, there isn't yet a reliable mechanism for signaling your preferences. But furthermore, there is actually no common vocabulary to talk about this stuff. So everybody on the different sides of these arguments are using their own nomenclature, their own kind of language to talk about these things, and it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of there's loggerheads where there really probably shouldn't be, because people have the same kind of ideas, they're just not using the same language. So at the IETF, one of the things that they're working on in the AI Pref working group is a shared vocabulary that standardizes how to actually talk about this stuff. So we're very early on in these discussions, and then so once we have this vocabulary, the rest of that stuff can follow. But I think that we're a little bit too early in that process to have anything reliable. But yeah, I guess watch this space.
Yeah, thank you for sharing not only the presentation but your data. I think in my mind, one of the issues, and I think people have kind of touched on it, is the use of your data. To me, is the thing that's the tricky element. So if people are using your data for doing the analysis on bias or other types of things or research, probably everyone's not going to come up in arms about these kinds of use cases. But when the data that you create is being used to generate perhaps billions, tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of revenue for corporations, and trillions of dollars of equity is being capitalized on that, I think that's where people are like, hey, wait a minute, that's maybe not what I was intending or wanting this data to be used. So how can you have strict, clear use limitations on your data that are enforceable, that are auditable, that can be backed up in the legal framework? It's because I think if that was shown to people and you had teeth and enforced and there was kind of a whole body of evidence that this is really what happens, this is how we assure that it happens, and that we prevent any other kinds of uses from occurring, then maybe your robot won't be blocked so much, and people would want, like to your point, that hey, my language data should be there, or my safety information should be there. It is for the betterment of everything, and I don't have to worry about these other uses.
So in so much as any preference has been stated by a website, we carefully preserve it and make it available afterwards. So for any of our web captures starting in 2016, we have the robots.txt that corresponds to every particular fetch. And if you have preferences that you expressed in HTTP headers, it's there. And if you have a preference that was embedded in the HTML, it's there. And so in so much as people express those preferences, you can go back and you can read it ex post facto. And so in theory, that might mean that researchers would be able to use all of our data, and then the large AI companies would have to pay the New York Times or whoever. In reality, the New York Times is so angry that they demand that we erase it, and they don't care if it has an effect on researchers. It's simply not something that they think about. But that's mainly only media organizations who are mad like that. So to get to the end, I don't think we could make any change that would be better than that already is. And we don't think that the folks who are angry are satisfied by that at all. The opt-out registry, by the way, it is a major step towards that, because it allows you to express a preference today about something that we crawled 10 years ago. As you know, there's a 3-year statute of limitations for copyright claims. So because we're a transparent organization, we're willing to make that information available, and that might affect how people treat the New York Times data from 2008. So we're doing the best we can, but I don't think it's going to move the needle on the perceptions of content owners.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think something that is important to remember is that, from the slides, you can see that all of the major players, let's call it like that, they have their own crawlers. They are performing their own crawls. So who is actually using Common Crawl as a main data source? Well, is mostly researchers, is small linguistic communities, is other nonprofits. I mean, the open source community is probably the number one, and the research community, of course, like they are the number one users of Common Crawl. I mean, myself, like when I did my PhD, Common Crawl allowed me to have all the data to develop an LLM, small by today's standards, but whatever, in French. And that was one of the first non-English models. And when we work today with the communities, especially, for instance, we recently had a hackathon in which we collected a bunch of annotations for African languages with Masakane. So they are a collective in Africa, and they try to develop all of these technologies for the languages. They told us, hey, Common Crawl is very, very important for us because that's that's probably the main data source, the biggest data source for my language. So having more coverage and even allowing our websites to be accessed by your bot is important to us because we want to be in your dataset. We want to develop these technologies as well. So I think that's something that's that we really have to remember, and it's that is not necessarily the big corporations that are gaining millions with Common Crawl data. It's mostly the researchers and the small linguistic communities and the nonprofits and the open source that are actually benefiting the most from this data set.
So the question was, is there anything in our license about commercial use? And the answer is no, there's nothing in our license about commercial use. And that's intentional.
Why is that? Why not do that? Because I think that's kind of going to the heart of what my question's about, right? Because I don't think anyone has a dispute about using your data for your PhD kind of thing. So why not?
So why is it that open software licenses don't ban commercial use?
Well, but I'm asking, you're the ones who are saying that you want your robot to not be blocked. And my argument is, I believe that one of the main reasons why people are blocking it is because they don't want the commercial use of their data without being remunerated. So why are you facilitating
Hey, my name's Ash. I'm coming from Planet Labs. We're a satellite imaging company, and we collect a lot of data, but it's not really easily accessible or indexed on the internet. However, I am aware there's a ton of other Earth observation data and imagery out in the wild, and I'm curious about your thoughts on multimodality and the potential to incorporate multimodal data into the crawl, possibly by automated captioning systems, just turning images that are already in the open web into textual content. And these data incentives and business questions are relevant to the world I'm in as well, as we are primarily a commercial data providing company at Planet. So kind of two parts to my question, but really curious your thoughts on those topics.
So from day one, we've been a text only crawl. And we were surprised to discover, I guess Sebastian, was the first one of us to notice that a lot of the multimodal data sets that are out there actually discover, for example, images in our crawl. They're pointed at by web pages. And the web pages also have text that's useful. So it might have an alt tag. It might have some text that's nearby the image link. And so people built multimodal data sets by using our text and then by fetching those images. And we haven't done any direct work with that, but almost all academic multimodal work that depends on web data does depend upon us. I'm not sure if we're going to necessarily get into that as something that we do. Other people seem to have done a good job with that already, but it would be nice to have a large and even larger than that's available now, multimodal data sets that do use things like captions and things and have the appropriate text that goes with the the images, the frames of the video, and that sort of stuff. So it's an interesting topic, but not something that we directly do now.
The question of what is our stance on why don't we differentiate public and or nonprofit use and for-profit use of the data? We believe in the computers have the right to read. That at the point of ingestion, that is not the proper place to enforce copyright. Sure, if you're OpenAI and you're using someone's data, perhaps you should license it, depending on what you're doing with it. For us, however, we are basically just crawling what people put out there. And we strongly believe that computers have a right to read and that we have a right to read anything you publish and put it into an index. So that's the reason. And so it comes from a philosophical stance. We're not profiting off of it, but we believe that there should be an open web that we can then provide access to for a variety of purposes. So I'm sorry that person left, but I do think we have an answer for that. So just wanted to point it out. And I'm Chris Tolles, Chris at commoncrawl.org if you have any questions.
Actually, Chris, that timing was impeccable since we are at 1:15 and closing up here. We've hit time. First off, let's thank our speakers again today.